Hello, everyone. Welcome to Study Travel TV Live, a show of news, statistics, and opinion. I'm Matthew Knott, news editor of Study Travel Magazine.
Hello, everyone. I'm Joshua Walton, staff journalist at StudyTravel Magazine. Before we get started, for the best viewing experience, please put the call in side-by-side speaker view. You'll see an icon in the top right-hand corner where you can select the view.
We are delighted to welcome you all today to the latest episode of Study Travel TV Live. In today's broadcast, we'll start with a news story, and then we'll be joined by our guest this week, Lou McLaughlin, Executive Director of International Language School accreditation body Eaquals and co-convener of GALA, and Jon Santangelo, Spokesperson and Senior Consultant for Chinese Agency Associations BOSSA and COSSA.
We'll then introduce a few more stories as we go through the show. If you have any questions for the presenters or guest speakers or any comments on the stories, please post them in the chat box and we'll read them out at the end. A big thank you to the sponsor of this episode, Language Cert.
And one more thing before we start, during this broadcast, we'll be running a special prize draw. One lucky viewer will be randomly chosen to receive a choice of study travel prizes, including free event attendance, accommodation, or free sponsorship or advertising package. In order to be in the prize draw, all you have to do is keep watching until the end of the broadcast. Okay then, so let's have a look at our first story this week. Study Travel Magazine's Global Market Report has been released, covering the 8 major English language study destinations and showing the full impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the ELT industry worldwide in 2020.
Global revenue for the ELT industry declined by 62% between 2019 and 2020 to $3.3 billion, the Study Travel Magazine analysis shows.
Student numbers decreased by 73% to just under 380,000 students, while student weeks dropped by 58% to 3.9 million weeks. All destinations suffered a decrease of at least 50% in terms of student numbers.
By student numbers, the UK retained the largest market share with 28%, followed by Australia, while Australia had the largest share of student weeks and revenue in 2020. Although Australia's borders closed in March 2020, a strong start to the year accounted for the lesser impact on the year as a whole, as English Australia's Brett Blacker explained on this programme previously.
So at this point, we'd like to introduce our guests, Jon and Lou.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, thank you so
Jon.
much for joining us. And there's Lou.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. So Jon, if we could come to you first. China was the top source market, as usual, for language schools in Australia and the USA in 2020, but also became the top market for Canada by dropping less than some of the other source countries, and was second for the UK in 2020. So what kind of language programs were Chinese students choosing in 2020? Were these long-term academic preparation students aiming to continue on to degree study, perhaps?
Yeah, it was definitely more of the long-term academic preparation students, more so, obviously, than the winter camps and the summer camps. There's just no denying that short-term camps took an undeniable hit in 2020. So the students who were maybe enrolled in an English language program within a university or a pathway program or at a language center or language school for the long term were far more likely to go abroad for English studies than any other kind of student.
And Lou, many of your Equals member schools are located in these countries, and as co-convener of GALA, you're in a regular contact with the associations that represent these destinations, as well as some of the other major language destinations. Which do you believe are recovering the quickest?
Thanks, Joshua, and yeah, a very good question. But first, as you know, Equals has the membership covers 3 sectors. So the higher education institutions, those extensive language schools that are working in country and teaching in country, and then the intensive schools, those focusing on study travel. And they've all had a very varied experience, very different challenges, and obviously then a varying recovery. So like those at HEI level were essentially in less vulnerable situations than the other 2 membership types. And some were actually gaining in student numbers, so possibly echoing a little what Jon mentioned there. And in terms of our language schools, the extensive membership is recovering at a much faster pace. They're in country, they're subject to less travel restrictions, and so their student numbers are increasing again. But in terms of destination recovery, we would think that within the membership, there isn't a clear outlier at present. Recovery itself is a very slow one. That said, those that have had sufficient reserves in place themselves or have managed to do that, those that have received more government support, maybe for example Ireland, the UK, Malta, they're potentially better placed for being able to start down that path to recovery when it happens. But one thing we have actually noticed ourselves is that those members offering English language courses as StudyTravel are actually seeing a better turnaround, so a better increase in growth with student numbers than those who are offering other languages, for example, German. But it's obviously extremely dynamic. There's this constant variability. We've all seen it over the last 18 months. So I don't think there's a definite answer to your question then, other than it's a case of watch this space on a weekly basis.
Thank you. And John, taking a longer term view of the future of ELT, what is the feeling amongst Chinese agencies about the recent legislation changes in China restricting the use of private tutoring firms for English language study? Could this actually increase demand for English study abroad in the long term?
Yeah, there is speculation that this could increase the overseas study for ELT. And the one thing that people really should keep in mind is these double reduction policies did not target study abroad agencies, because study abroad agencies fall under a different category. They have to have a specific license to carry out English language training. And also the age that was affected by the double reduction policy was K through 9 up until 9th grade. So study abroad agencies typically deal with students who are above grade 9. And more on that, if a student's ready, if their English level's already sufficient, they're probably just going to go abroad straight into undergraduate or graduate studies anyway. And if not, they're likely to enroll in, again, an English language program or a pathway program. So for the most part, it's not really going to affect study abroad. The one concern is for students, for the younger students. There has been quite a number of new restrictions introduced, and that does include English language learning for younger children. They're not supposed to enroll or partake in holiday camps, and I'm talking about within China. So holiday camps, and then there's time restrictions during the week, and on holidays, labor holidays, and that could, in the long run, that could encourage more students to go abroad for language related studies at a younger age. But right now it's sort of hard to tell what's going to happen.
Thanks, John. Okay, let's take another story. And the latest travel industry data and consumer sentiment research has suggested some slight recovery in the wider travel industry. The UN World Tourism Organization said that July 2021 was the strongest month for travel since April 2020, with 54 million tourist arrivals. However, this figure was still only approximately 1/3 of arrivals compared with July 2019.
The latest UNWTO tracker on accessibility shows that only 6% of countries worldwide have full entry restrictions, and 91% are operating with some restrictions on entry. The Asia Pacific region is the most restricted, with 22% still maintaining some full restrictions on international travel as of this morning.
Meanwhile, the latest travel sentiment survey by the European Travel Commission, which has tracked attitudes towards domestic and intra-European travel during the pandemic, found that 2/3 of respondents were planning to take a trip in the next 6 months, and that 55% of those favoured a trip to another European country, overtaking domestic travel plans for the first time. Confidence with air travel has also increased, the ETC said.
And Visit Britain's latest COVID-19 sentiment tracker, based on a survey of potential clients in 13 key markets found increased confidence in travel, with 50% saying that they would definitely consider traveling in the next 12 months. France and Italy were amongst the markets most keen to travel, Visit Britain said. Meanwhile, in Australia, some 4 billion air miles have reportedly been redeemed in the last 2 weeks.
John, China's aviation regulator said on Friday that it will allow 408 scheduled international passenger flights to and from the country per week in the winter season ending in March 2022, down from 644 this summer. So that's down 21% from a year ago, when international travel was already heavily depressed due to the surging COVID-19 pandemic. So that can't be good news for BOSSA and COSSA. Were you expecting better news, John?
To tell you the truth, not really. The Beijing Olympics will start in the winter time, January, February. So we're optimistic that after March, travel restrictions will be somewhat lifted. But nobody really knows the situation when it comes to travel restrictions and border restrictions in China. We can only speculate. But I personally, I don't see the stringent travel or the quarantine restrictions lifting up, at least for another half a year. And that means 2 to 3 weeks of quarantine once you enter China. So that part, coming to China, will be difficult, but leaving China after March, we're more optimistic about. So educators abroad could also be optimistic about that as well.
Okay, thank you. And Lou, the European Travel Commission and the Visit Britain data suggest some returning confidence and that students want to travel. What is needed, do you think, from either an industry or a government level to turn this increased confidence into bookings?
It's a very good question, and something we've all been mulling over and discussing amongst ourselves. And there were two clear things that are needed from both government and from within the industry then ourselves. First is that clarity of information, and then the accessibility, being able to access that information easily. So with clarity, it's the clarity of information around government policy that regarding measures that are in place for international travel, the checks, the testing, the requirements, the protocols. And then within industry, at the level of health and safety measures that are in place in the institutions, in the language schools, and the policies and procedures that they have implemented for that to ensure both student and staff safety. So that would be being very, very clear around those policies. And then the access to that information is another one. So it needs to be managed for ourselves with students and agents so that it's easily available and comprehensible to the parents, to the students, and to the teachers as well. And this was actually one of the points at the last joint Gaela Falcon meeting that we had covered. And we both noted the importance that there was in being able to do this, because it will increase that confidence and get it over into bookings, because the reassurance will be there. We'll be able to access the information, but it will be clear. And so parents will be reassured if they're talking about bringing their young learners to another country or sending them there. So yeah, that confidence is there. It's tentative. So we just want to get it over the line. But obviously the ongoing reactive nature of last minute decisions in relation to travel restrictions, whether they're being lifted or put back in again, hasn't helped dissipate that uncertainty at all around travel. So hopefully a move away from that in the coming weeks and months as well will definitely assist with this. And we should see hopefully an increase in bookings for all.
Hopefully, fingers crossed. Okay, let's move on to another story. And StudyTravel Magazine has reported that international education industry associations are increasingly returning to face-to-face events. Spanish agency association ASAPROCE is hosting its annual workshop this week, while Italian agency association Eaquals will hold its second Salon del Lingua event later this month, a combination of an agent workshop and a student fair. Both the ASAPROCE and Eaquals events are being supported by StudyTravel's meeting manager platform, and the way to apply for events such as this is through the StudyTravel network.
SF Berlin 2021 has just finished today as a hybrid conference, and as previously reported on this show, StudyTravel Limited has confirmed a series of in-person plus events for 2022, starting with Malaga in January. IALC and Alto have also announced plans to host face-to-face events early next year.
And of course, Eaquals hosted its annual conference in Belfast recently as a hybrid in-person and online event where it celebrated its 30th anniversary and hosted 3 days of professional development sessions and updates.
So Lou, can you tell us how the Equals conference went in Belfast? Were there any logistical issues that you had to overcome? And did everyone who intended to travel get there okay?
Absolutely. We were delighted the conference went ahead after a number of postponements over the last sort of 18 months. And it was our 30th anniversary, as you mentioned. So that in itself made it special, but it really had that extra special feel to it, because for most, if not all of us, that was the first time we were able to meet again in person for 2 years. So yes, it was quite emotional. And then we had an added layer because this was our first hybrid event, which went very well. We had over 100 participants in Belfast from 19 different countries in person. And then we had the online attendees as well. So logistically, we worked very hard to make sure that everyone had the most up-to-date information coming into the country around travel requirements, the testing, the quarantining. And then at the venue itself, it was making sure that guidelines were being observed around masks and social distancing and contact tracing. Well, we're a really resilient bunch within the study travel sector and the industry, so there weren't too many obstacles that we really couldn't overcome, and that came through in conference. Yes, we were reflecting on 30 years, of the association, but it was very much also forward focused and what we can do and how we can move forward together. And yeah, I think it was very successful. It gave us a lot of confidence about moving forward and attending much more in-person events over the next few months. So we're all looking forward to that again.
Very good, and congratulations on the anniversary.
Thank you.
John, I gather that BOSSA has done a little research with institutions in the USA on how they have engaged with Chinese agencies through the pandemic. What can you tell us about how things have changed in terms of maybe to online recruitment and events?
Sure. So I can begin by saying we were sort of surprised to know that more schools are conducting digital marketing in China. Now, whether that means they're paid campaigns or just putting up a WeChat account and a Chinese website, those are similar but two different things. One's paid and relies on ads, and the other is just more for information. But yeah, digital marketing is becoming more of the norm. So about 2/3 of those schools say they are doing some form of digital marketing. Another third said they do not, and then relying on agencies to conduct digital marketing was about 20%. Now, recruiting methods, new ways in which COVID has changed Chinese student recruitment. Of course, there's been a shift to online recruitment. 55% of the schools surveyed utilize online workshops and webinars. There's a greater reliance on agencies to recruit in China, but they are anticipating less Chinese students for the academic year. And schools are also looking to form new partnerships with agencies because some of the ones they were with went out of business. And last, some schools plan to continue a hybrid system of student recruitment, combining travel to China with online recruitment. So yeah.
Thanks, John. Okay, let's take another story. The International House Sydney Group of English language schools in Australia has announced changes to its ELT offerings that will enable students to take short pre-arrival courses online and to also meet classmates and teachers before they arrive.
The school will also be incorporating VR technology into in-class lessons and will be allowing students to connect with students at other international house schools around the world during regular in-class activities.
Tim Eckenfels, CEO and owner of IH Sydney Training Services, said that 2022 success stories will be told by providers who have taken advantage of changes during the pandemic to modernize their courses and enrich the student experience.
Lou, Equals accredits language schools across the world, and you've done a lot of work in the last 18 months in the online teaching space. Would you agree with Tim's comments there? Do you think this kind of hybrid of online and in-person learning is the future of language study?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with the sentiments that Tim has mentioned there. And I've already mentioned the sort of resilience within the industry, which puts us in a strong place moving forward. I mean, new developments are always going to be part of a successful solution. But I think it's important to just remember that we have to be very clear about and understand how to use those tools, what the parameters are, make sure that there's an appropriate level of scrutiny before implementation, and that there's an informed, principle behind the decisions taken in that move. I mean, it's standard practice essentially, but I feel more important than ever within the current climate. And just was reflecting on what one of our plenary speakers, Professor Rona Sharp, actually mentioned during our conference. And it was really interesting because she actually brought into focus the fact that essentially we're not developing lots of new ways of doing things here, with online and even with VR. Those things were there, but we've just got to them much, much quicker. For some, it's been overnight. For some, it's been 6 months or whatever. But the technology was there. We were moving down that path to at least start looking at it. But it's just been a much quicker journey. And I mean, as to the future, I don't believe that we completely understand, what that landscape looks like as yet. It's still in a real state of flux. We're working to situate projects and developments within this. But at the same time, the most important thing, aside from any project we have, is the flexibility and adaptability that we've built in around it. So, yes, there's a shape of the journey. It's going to involve components of online, face-to-face, blended, hybrid, whatever vocabulary we're putting around it. But what it will look like within 12 months, we just do have to wait and see. However, and this is one point I think is very important to get across, and again was something coming out of our conference, was that irrespective of whether we're talking about hybrid or face-to-face, whatever that medium of delivery is, the focus has to be around quality and value. So that, we don't want to lose sight of that in the midst of this discussion as well.
And just on the point really of quality going forward, now that we're more than a year on from this major pivot to online learning, what do you think worked and what hasn't worked so well during that time?
The main thing that I would say that has worked has been this sense of sharing of knowledge, because that has allowed us to move forward quickly. It's allowed us to adapt, but adapt in terms of still maintaining that delivery of quality to everybody. So that has to be key, irrespective of sort of the paths that people took in the short turnaround that they had to do.
Thank you. John, English Australia released data on the location of its students during the pandemic, and the vast majority of those that were pursuing offshore online courses were in China. Is this dynamic affected by the regulations that we spoke about earlier? And do you think there is a market for language schools around the world to deliver online programs to students in China? And will that market be through agencies?
Yeah, it's always been a tough market, even before the pandemic, especially for online English learning. So the double reduction policy does state that the language teachers have to be based in China. So that's one mega challenge. And you can see what happened with some of these platforms that had tens of thousands of online English teachers who were abroad. They're having to dismiss those contracts. So if any English school is trying to get into China, first they need to know that they need to target a certain age group. Again, that's above grade 9. So that's what we call in high school, the middle school, high school level, grade 10, 11, 12. And yeah, they will need to partner with a local company, and that local company will need to have the specific license to carry out those lessons. And yeah, I'm not sure if the teacher, if they're teaching online, will need to be in China or not. But again, they will need to partner with a local company, I think, to have any kind of success.
And do you think agencies will be sort of promoting that kind
Well,
of
yeah,
offer?
there was some interesting phenomenon here. So one of the big four agents started pivoting into this space of having online language learning. Before, they were just focused on study abroad. I'm not sure how that's going, but my guess would be that they're going to steer the course and continue down that path. They were, again, one of the largest agencies, sending tens of thousands of students abroad a year. From my understanding, they're not in the top four anymore. So if that's any indicator of where the market or where the industry might be going, that could be one.
Okay, thank you. And time for one more story, and some news just in. Actually, the Japanese government seems set to allow international students holding a student visa to enter the country for the first time in almost a year, according to local media reports.
It has also been reported that the quarantine period for vaccinated arrivals will be reduced from 10 days to just 3 days under the new rules. Agencies, schools, and students have been lobbying for change, and around 148,000 students are waiting to travel to Japan, according to an association established to lobby for the opening of borders.
John, China is by far the largest source market for Japan's international education industry, and accounted for around 40% of their students in 2019. So I guess this must be welcome news for agencies in China.
Yes, I would say so. We can expect to see just overall more dispersion from students. I mean, we'll see students still going to the traditional locations or destinations like US, UK, Australia, but we're going to start seeing, we predict in the next decade, we're going to see more of a dispersion into Asia, and of course, Japan, and then other East Asian, Southeast Asian countries. So yeah, I would say this is good news for students and agents in China.
Thank you. And that brings us up to date with all the news and goings on in the industry. At this point, we'll completely open up to the audience to see if there are any questions for our guests or for the StudyTravel team. These can be on any of the stories or topics we have discussed today. Do please make sure that your organization and your name are in your Zoom name or in the question you post in the chat box.
And we've got a couple of questions that have been sent to us while we were discussing the stories here. Lou, what activities does Eaquals have planned for the next few months?
Well, we're in full preparation mode for our next conference, given the success that we were able to run the last one with. So we feel much more confident about going ahead. So we're preparing that for April, when we'll be going to Venice. And actually the call for papers has gone out. On the accreditation side of things, we're quite busy. In response to the move online, we were able to offer sort of re-inspections on that in terms of being on site if possible, or also a blended version, or also the online version as well. So we've been able to pick up those that were just on hold a little while as everyone was sort of getting through the last 18 months. So a lot there. And then as you probably know from that came out of conference, we've released a new framework which focuses on academic management competency. So we'll be taking that forward in terms of getting more feedback and working with members on it. So quite a number of projects there to cover over the next couple of months.
Thank you. And John, we have one here for you as well. Is the Chinese government providing any support to agencies at this time?
There was support during COVID, certain subsidies on rent, I believe. I'm not too familiar with the matter, but I can't really I can't really claim much assistance. I think I can say that our members have reported rebounding or bouncing back since last year. And I do know agents that have actually hired more staff and are sending more students abroad. So again, if that's any indicator of where the market is going, we are again optimistic that the market will just continue to grow and more students will continue to go abroad.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Doesn't look like we have any more questions coming in the chat. So that looks like the end of our audience Q&A, which brings us to the end of this week's Study Travel TV Live. But now is the time we've all been waiting for, and it's time to announce the winner of the prize draw. And I can reveal that the winner is Gary Farmer from Brighton Language College. Congratulations, Gary. You have a choice of prizes worth around £400, which include digital advertising options or sponsorship options or hotel accommodation around an Alfie conference. So we'll be in touch to discuss those with you. Congratulations. And you can tune in live to the next episode on November 17th for another chance to win in the prize draw.
And visit the Study Travel TV live page on Study Travel Network, which you can find under the magazine section in the menu, where we'll be announcing the guest speakers for the next broadcast, as well as a recording of this episode and past episodes.
And finally, we'd like to say a big thank you to our special guests. John, thank you for your time and insights today, especially at such a late hour of the day, your time. So thank you very much.
And my pleasure. Thank you.
And Lou, thank you so much for your input. We look forward to seeing you both again soon.
Thank you.
And thank you again to our sponsor this week, Language Cert. And thank you to everyone for watching. Goodbye.